Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about part 2 of Theos against God, which is the series on the definition of the word atheism from multiple sources, in this case nearly 60 sources, so definitely 50 plus sources from academia which define what atheism means. And of course we're going to have to find out, does academia see atheism as in the same way, with the same definition as atheists, the average YouTube atheist? And spoiler alert, no, it does not. Hey Thaddeus, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on once again. We've had some interesting discussion with atheists since the last one. And I think that as we continue to look at this, we're kind of seeing that, strangely enough, this is a super important issue to atheists. You'd think the definition of a term would be just kind of a given, but no, there's a big fight, it seems, with the atheists asserting that they know the correct meaning of the term and no one else does.
That is very, very true. And in fact, we are told, as we've seen in comments, that when an atheist gives you a definition, you have to accept it. When someone tells you his gender, or their gender, sorry, I shouldn't use the word his, when they tell you their gender, you have to believe it. When they give you their pronouns, you have to accept them, because we don't want to be bigots now. So when someone gives you a definition of atheism, you just have to bend over and accept it, apparently. Do you think that's a reasonable position to take, that you have to accept whatever you're told about someone's definition?
Yeah, I don't think that that's a very fair definition or very fair point at all. If you're just going to assert that whatever you say is right, then you can just change all the terms. You say something that's false, and you get caught on it. No, 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 no. I was just using the word in a different way than the way you define it. And since I get to tell you how I define my words, then that's all there is to it. But as long as they want to play that game, I'm going to redefine Christianity as being true by definition. So then there's no argument to have.
Yeah, so welcome to Atheist Abdulism. So we have Dodzor in the chat. There's a guy called Reasoned Answers. He was second. Dodzor was first. There's a guy called Lloyd de Jongh. He was third. Hey, guy's got the same name as me. That's incredible. I have a fan with the same name as me. That's cool. Posted to a couple of servers, Lloyd. Thank you. That's villainous. Yaya, Mary Alex, welcome everyone. Then we have Harriel Johnson. Hello and welcome. Scrunchy and Nicholas. Hello, friends. A Swedish theist checking in. Yeah, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, so guys, let me, since the last show, I've had, larger numbers of atheists, I think, are discovering the channel, discovering the content, and starting to comment on the content. So, here we've got respectful debates. I recall he made a disrespectful comment on your channel recently. Sorry. So, yeah. He says, atheist here, some thoughts. The definition of atheism as being anti-God was made by Christians. Atheists have never defined it that way, Thaddeus. Would you believe that?
Well, I wouldn't believe it, but as we know, we're supposed to just take his word for it and not investigate anything. So I guess I have to accept that.
Right. And then contemporary atheists define atheism as lack of belief in God, except for those contemporary atheists who don't. But I can show you another comment that someone, when I showed two totally contradictory definitions of a concept in atheism, and then this atheist girl tells me they're both correct. They're completely, this is today, this is like 2 hours ago. They totally, completely contradict each other. I will show you guys this slide later, but they're completely contradicting. She says, no, they're both correct. Because they're both atheists, they're both correct. I'm like, how? These are totally contradictory ideas. But hey, don't question it, because, and notice he says here, atheism is a lack of belief, okay? It is not a worldview. It is a position taken after deep analysis. Now, it's a lack of belief, so it's not a position, but it's a position taken after deep analysis. It's a lack of belief because you haven't thought about it. It's just a indifference, an absence, a void, a mental, social, psychological vacuum taken after deep analysis. So how can you have a lack of belief when you've taken a position after not thinking about something? This is incoherence. This is stupidity on a monumental scale. Thaddeus, your thoughts? I'm not as articulate as I should be. I should be more polite, perhaps, but...
I think that you have that exactly right. This atheist who wants to allegedly have a respectful debate first defines atheism as lack of belief. I mean, he uses the word define, and then he says atheism is a position. And not only is it a position, it's a position taken after deep analysis. Well, which is it? Is it just a lack of belief, or is it a position? Those are contradictory, mutually exclusive definitions of atheism. If it's merely a lack of belief, that doesn't require any deep analysis. It's not even a position. It's just something you don't have. A rock doesn't have belief in God. It lacks belief in God. But a rock doesn't have a position on the existence of God. So what we're saying is number 3 is correct. It is a position. It's a position that's taken. I would disagree with after deep analysis, but it's a position that supposedly has evidence behind it. So the atheist is therefore responsible for giving reasons, but they don't want to give reasons. So they redefine it as lack of belief. Amazing.
Yeah, and it's taken off to deep analysis, right? Now, of course, the lack of belief is just that, a lack of belief, which means you haven't thought about it, which explains how atheism is scientific. Because remember, atheists use science. They use science to come to conclusions, except they haven't formed a conclusion because they lack a belief, because it's just a psychological vacuum. Psychological vacuums are scientific. Shut up, you bigot. Correct, Thaddeus?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Exactly what they tell us, anyway.
Yep. So, okay, so that one out the way. Here's another one. This will be very interesting, guys. Go look up this article. It's actually quite good reading. A History of the Word Atheism and the Politics of Dictionaries. This is on the Non-Religion and Secularity Research Network. So just a few highlights from this, okay? So Nathan Alexander details a history of the ways atheism has been defined in English dictionaries, as well as the ways that atheists have pushed back against negative definitions of atheism and influenced these definitions over time. So it's not that these definitions have changed organically. They have been struggling to redefine these positions to basically bolster their position as a convenience, as a rhetorical convenience. Now have a look at a few choice points here. How does one define atheism? For many, the answer might be to simply look it up in the dictionary. But then, how do dictionary makers know the definition of a word? And what makes them qualified to define words? Thaddeus, you can't trust that dictionary. That's not my dictionary. Didn't I say that? That's not my dictionary. The dictionary makers are not godly beings who descend from the sky to instruct mere mortals like ourselves about the correct meaning of words. I make up my own pronouns. I make up my own genders, bigots. I think that sounds familiar. I wonder where we got this idea. They're human beings with their own biases, blah, blah. The dictionary still looms over contemporary discussions about the meaning of... So the dictionary threatens atheists because when they say, but I believe atheism is a religion of peace... Someone pulls out a dictionary and says, hold on, it says here in the dictionary. Do you dictionary bigot you? Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely laughing there that the dictionary is threatening the atheist. But, I mean, that's kind of what he's saying, isn't it? They're saying, these dictionaries are defining our terms in ways we don't accept. This is because of bigoted Christians who wrote the dictionary to make fun of us.
It's the patriarchy. Oh my God. Yeah, so Scrunchy says, so the dictionary is being cancelled. I'm afraid we're going to have to cancel. That's why it is called, as we all know, as I mentioned last week, I did mention on the last show, that's why it is now called the, it's called the Oxford English, dictionary. That's why it's now called the Oxford English Dictionary. That's what we're being told. It's the Oxford Dictionary. Can't trust that thing. Yes, so just a couple of points of this article. What's wrong with this? The problem is that it puts the burden of proof on atheists to give a positive argument for why God did not exist. Hold on. If atheism is not just a mere lack of belief, but a position, the problem is that it puts the burden of proof on atheists to give a positive argument for why God did not exist. But proving something that does not exist is extremely difficult, perhaps impossibly so. Oh my God. That is why atheists sought to deny that they denied God's existence. I'll say that again. This is why atheists sought to deny that they denied God's existence. And this we see all the time, but it doesn't mean that we deny, we just lack a belief. This was most clearly done by Charles Bradlaugh, a well-known British atheist in the 19th century, in his pamphlet A Plea for Atheism. So this is where the whole idea of when they started to run into intellectual trouble, they had to change the definition and use propaganda and rhetoric. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I go to these slides?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, he's right that it's difficult to prove something doesn't exist, but it's also difficult to prove something does exist. That part he doesn't mention. That you can always come up with reasons to deny something. You can always come up with reasons why the evidence that it doesn't exist is invalid. So they want to shift it. They want to shift it to be so one-sided so that they can just sit there and deny anything you say. Really, a fair position would be both sides are responsible to bring evidence. But the atheist doesn't want that fair standing where they have a equal responsibility to bring evidence.
Yep, that's it. And then finally, just as last point, he complained that dictionary makers did not take into account how atheists themselves defined the term. You have to respect my pronouns. You don't respect my gender. So yeah, apparently we should just believe whatever the average atheist tells us, as opposed to any kind of authority, because everyone's his own pope, of atheism apparently. And we must have the term explained by the devotee. Hold on, it's just a lack of belief. What do you mean it's a devotee? Someone who's devoted to his views. It's not a view. It's not a worldview. I had someone swear at me because I said it's a worldview. If we want to know what atheism is, we must find out... Sorry, let me read that again. If we want to know what Islam is, we must find out what Muslims mean by the term. If you want to know what Islam is, you must ask a Muslim. Correct, Thaddeus?
I mean, we definitely hear that all the time. One of the grand proofs of a Muslim who comes to my channel and complains about something I've said is, you're not a scholar of Islam. Or they tell me straight up, if you want to know about Islam, ask a Muslim. And I always ask them, if Islam is not true, then would you expect a Muslim to tell you that? And they never answer that question. But what they want to do is the same thing the atheist wants to do. They want to define their position as true. You can only learn Islam from someone who believes it's true. You can only learn atheism from someone who takes a position where they are not responsible for bringing any evidence.
Yep, so there you go. So guys, this is a very interesting read of this article, some of the history and the politics of dictionaries, how dictionaries are a deliberate attack on atheism. So guys, I would suggest break out the world's smallest violin, have a glass of wine, and shed a tear for how dictionaries hurt some people's feelings. So, yeah.
Yeah, as long as we're going with this rule that the devotee of the religion or non-position in atheism's case apparently gets to define the term. Again, I'm just going to define Christianity as true. There is no debate because I've already defined it as true. It's essentially what the atheist wants to do. They want to define it as the default position, so there is no debate about it.
So we're all born Muslims, you say, that is?
Yeah, apparently.
We're all born Muslims, and then our parents, indoctrinate us into Christianity. Hold on. Sorry, did I say that wrong? Sorry, we're all born atheists, and then our parents Hold on. Why does this sound familiar?
Yeah, pretty similar.
Yeah. So, guys, I know I only announced this like an hour and 15 minutes before, but I thought we would stream, and so my apologies for the short notice. We ended off here last week. Last a couple of days ago. So Carl Sagan, an atheist, is someone who is certain that God does not exist. I know of no such compelling evidence, though, says Carl Sagan. But of course, Carl Sagan is not a real atheist. In fact, he's not an atheist. Although he claims to be an agnostic, because he never quite pulled the trigger on calling himself an atheist, he was not friendly to the church, he was not friendly to Christianity, and in terms of intent and his general language, he acted as aggressively as any atheist. Let's just put it that way. And when you read the words of people who knew him very well, like his friends and close associates, family, and so on, apparently he was quite negative and quite aggressive. So he was right on that line. He just wouldn't call himself an atheist, but for all intents and purposes, he pretty much was the Richard Dawkins of his day. So yeah, but that's fascinating. So I mean, do we trust Carl Sagan, or do we trust random atheist 45 in the comments? And you all know you have to trust random atheist 45 because he's an expert. And of course, man, I've been saying this all the time. He's not my scholar. Well, that's not my dictionary, right? So, so by the way, this guy mentioned in the comment that he was looking at the Samuel Johnson dictionary, right? Which is oddly enough from the 1600s. What's interesting, it was maybe the 20th such dictionary to be created, and atheists, oddly, had been defining atheism since prior to that. So I don't know where the problem is. In fact, the definition of atheism as just a lack of belief came well after that, when they started to run into intellectual trouble. So yeah. Okay, so here are my thoughts on atheism. Atheism is just a lack of belief, a mere psychological, mental vacuum, a knowledge vacuum. So it's a lack of thought about God. They haven't thought about the problem. They haven't just thought about the issue. So atheism is a non-position. I've literally been told that. It's a non-position. It is a vacuum of thought, a lack, an empty absence, and there's no presence at all. So it's just an absence. There's no presence of any thought or any ideas. When I tell you to not think about pink elephants, you don't think about pink elephants. You just have a lack, an absence. You don't go, I don't believe in pink elephants. Go away. No. There's just a lack, absolute, complete lack. Atheism defines people who have done no thinking and reached no conclusions. They have formed no beliefs about God or theism. Because they are scientific, they follow science, they use the scientific method, therefore they haven't done any thinking whatsoever. They've used precisely zero brain power. They have just this empty vacuum hollow inside of their brains. So an atheist is someone who has not reached conclusion and has no beliefs. And they'll write 500-page books to tell you exactly all the beliefs they don't have. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I go on?
Yeah, well, I have definitely met atheists in the real world who would fall under this, where they really haven't thought much about it. They don't have any strong opinions. They don't have any interest in discussing it. Strangely, those aren't the same people that come in and argue strongly for the definition of atheism. If it's just a lack of belief, just something that's a default position, why in the world are you spending hours of your time seeking out YouTube videos to write comments on about how ignorant theists are for using the wrong definition? If you don't care, you don't care. I mean, let's be real here.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So atheism is not the use of reason. It's just a lack of belief. Atheism is not about reason. It is a lack of thinking. A lack of belief, it's a lack of thinking. I don't think about it. So it's a lack of thinking. I don't think that's an unrealistic thing to say. It's a lack of worldview on God. It is a lack of conclusions. So you've reached no conclusions. You've done no thinking. You've reached no conclusion. It is a lack of arguments on the topic of theism. So they have no arguments. They have done no thinking. They have no position. So therefore it's a psychological, hollow, and empty mental space with no critical thought, no analyses, no bases or rationales to work from. Right? This is what a lack of belief would be, an empty space with nothing in it. As you know, the scientific saying is nature adores a vacuum, especially psychological vacuums. Right? So yeah, just remember that. The next time atheist tells you, it's just a lack of belief. Atheists have literally no opinion on God because they boast that they have failed to think about this whatsoever, which makes atheism scientific. Right? And we all know the above examples are examples of logical stupidity and experientially obviously false. Atheists are just very angry at God. That's all that is. Yeah, is that even possible? Nicholas Paulson asks, well, that's what they want to tell us. That's what they want to gaslight us about. This is gaslighting. Atheism is built on a philosophical foundation of pagan 6th century BC sophistry, or 4th century BC sophistry. It's not based on the logos, it's based on the will. Thaddeus, you're nodding your head?
Yeah, definitely. If we want to take the atheist definition seriously, then everything on this slide is true, basically. I mean, it's a bit sarcastic, but in
No.
reality, it's basically the position they want to assert they have. But at the same time, they want to argue for their position. They want to tell us we're wrong about our position. They want to assert that they are intellectual. They have given deep thought to this, etc., etc. Well, which is it? Is it merely a lack of belief, or is it a position established after deep thought about it? It's one or the other. It's not both. The two are incompatible. They're different things.
Yeah. Now, logic, Aristotelian logic, is what is sometimes called non-contradictory logic. Now, earlier we were presented with utterly contradictory logic, and therefore, by definition, it's not logical. So this is, but apparently, these are the rational ones. So yeah, moving on. So atheism. Back to Encyclopaedia Britannica. Atheism, a rejection of religious beliefs. Atheism is a critique. Notice I've got the picture of Marx here, because Marx and Lenin both say in their writings, the criticism of religion is the basis of all criticism. Now, when they say criticism, it's like critical race theory. It's not to criticize and discuss, to critique. It is to tear down and destroy. When Marx says criticism, he means to destroy, the destruction of. So, for him and for the socialists, the criticism of religion is the foundation of all criticism. So, atheism, according to Britannica, is the critique and the denial, that's a verb, by the way, of metaphysical beliefs in God or spiritual beings. As such, it is usually distinguished from theism, which affirms the reality of the divine and often seeks to demonstrate its existence. Atheism is the opposite of that. It seeks to critique and deny that. It's the opposite position. Would that be accurate, Thaddeus?
Yeah, you mentioned that either something's true or the opposite is true. So theism is the position that God exists. The opposite is the position that God does not exist, which apparently is not atheism. Apparently that's something else, according to atheists.
Which we don't have a word for.
Right, that we have no word for. The atheist wants to live in the middle. They want to live in the excluded middle, where they have no obligation to defend a position. They're definitely not theists, but apparently they're not the opposite of theist either. They're somewhere in that excluded middle, which can't actually exist.
Yeah, but so yeah, let's before I say anything out of line on that, but yeah, that why don't you believe me, bigot? So, according to Britannica, atheism is also distinguished from agnosticism, which leaves open the question of whether there is a God or not, professing to find the questions unanswered or unanswerable. So, it's not agnosticism then, which says, hey, we don't know, we can't answer that. And then Britannica tells us atheism is not only a rejection of the central concepts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it is as well a rejection of the religious beliefs of such African religions as that of the Dinka and the Nuer, pagan religions basically, of the anthropomorphic gods of classical Greece and Rome. Although you will notice if you look online, atheists are now saying, well, our traditions of thought, our philosophies, are traced to the great cultures of Greece and Rome, to those fine thinkers like Aristotle and Plato. We trace ourselves to those pagans, so yeah, who believed in gods, except they weren't really, they whatever. So yeah, so they reject the classical Greece, but they want to associate themselves with the classical thinkers of Greece and Rome. But of course, when you look at what these classical thinkers of Greece and Rome that they associate with, they were sophists, they were liars. Let's put it that way. And of the transcendental conceptions of Hinduism and Buddhism. Generally, it states here in Britannica, atheism is a denial of God. And if religion is defined in terms of belief in spiritual beings, then atheism is the rejection of all religious belief. It is the opposite position. So, yeah, Villainous says that I was thinking that teabag atheism, that's because my teabag's an atheist, because it doesn't have any beliefs, is an attempt to include more people in the movement to use overstated populism to bolster the argument. And that is exactly what some of the academia states, Villainous. It's exactly what they do. In fact, that's my final slide, which is a paper on exactly that point. Because it's the fastest growing religion, don't you know? So, yeah. Okay. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I go on?
Well, I just have a question for you. Isn't it true that Britannica was published by the Catholic Church, unless we can't trust it?
Uh, if a Jew once walked in the office or walked past the office, you also have to reject it because you can't trust those Jews, according to everyone on YouTube, apparently. So maybe, who knows? It could have been a Catholic or a Jew who worked there. Yeah, you have to reject it. Maybe a Nazi worked there too. You never know. In which case, you have to just
Yeah.
throw it all out. You have to throw it all out. Can't be true. So I don't know. Was Britannica owned by the Catholic Church? I don't think so. Not that I know of. I mean, that's the first I hear of it.
No, no, I was just being silly because the guy asserted that all these definitions come from Christians.
Christianity, yeah, yeah, yeah. In the fact, I mean, I'm going to present like 50 plus definitions from mostly atheists, but it's like no, it's Christians. It's like no, those are atheists. It's like, yeah, denial, man. Talk about Abdulism. Right. So, from the New Encyclopedia of Unbelief from 2007, notice edited by Tom Flynn with a foreword by a guy called Richard Dawkins. You may have heard of him. I don't know. Sounds familiar. In its broadest sense, atheism, from the Greek without, and theos, deity, standardly refers to the denial of the existence of any god or gods. Hey, Richard Dawkins gave his name to this thing. It's the rejection of. It's not just a lack of belief. We reject your premises. We have our own premises because we reject yours. Your thoughts on that, Thaddeus?
Well, apparently Tom Flynn, although he pretends to be an atheist, apparently he's actually a Christian because we know this definition only comes from Christians.
Like Christians like Richard Dawkins.
Yep.
Who endorsed it. So, yeah. So, atheism, without theism, there's nothing more to it. John, unfortunately, academia entirely disagrees with that. So, loads of highly educated atheist academics totally and utterly disagree with that statement. So, Richard Dawkins tells us it's the denial. It's not just the lack of belief, it's the denial. That's the opposite position. So, now we go to the Oxford Companion to Philosophy, the new edition from 2005. Atheism is ostensibly the doctrine that there is no God. Some atheists support this claim by arguments, some atheists, but these arguments are usually directed against the Christian concept of God. Agnosticism, what did they just say? It's the doctrine. A doctrine is a set of beliefs. Doctrine is what the Catholic Church has to describe its belief in God. Doctrine is what any church has, in fact. Okay? Christian doctrine. Baptist doctrine, Roman Catholic doctrine. It's a large set of beliefs, a set of positions and bases on which you stand. And it says here these arguments are usually directed against the Christian concept of God. Somehow, Oxford Companion to Philosophy has not realized it's just a lack of belief. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
They have a very telling statement there, which is, I mean, it's really just an observation. It's not really the definition of atheism, but they say that atheists usually argue specifically against Christianity, against the Christian conception of God, which is accurate. They are completely accurate in that statement. But if atheism is actually not anti-Christian and it's just a lack of belief in God, why would they be directing all their arguments against Christianity? Why aren't they arguing against, spiritual concepts in a much broader sense, against there being multiple gods? Ironically, one of the arguments I hear often from atheists is if religion, or if there was a God, then the world would look like a Marvel comic universe, where there's direct actions from the many gods. And I'm like, you do realize that would be a polytheistic religion, has nothing to do with Christianity. So by saying that if that's what the world would look like, you're actually arguing for polytheism, not for atheism, and that I quite don't understand that.
Okay, yeah. And we should also state that, as I've shown in the other series, the other shows in the series, the other streams in terms of the series, like the foundation, the early roots, the historical beginnings of modern atheism, atheism was begun specifically as a socio-political movement with a religious foundation. So it was a socio-political religion, like Islam. It was started specifically as a replacement religion to Christianity, and it was directed specifically and explicitly against the church. So oh, John, this is your opinion. I am going through 50 plus academic sources, and unfortunately, those sources disagree with you completely. The "are" means without. Don't confuse atheism with anti-theism, because many of these sources tell us exactly that. And in fact, in practice, we all know it's exactly that. So someone has to get on the horn to Richard Dawkins and tell him that. Someone contact, Peter Hitchens, and let him know he's dead, but someone let him know that he was doing it wrong. Right? So these arguments are usually directed against the Christian concept of God. That is anti-theism. It's exactly the same as Islam, exactly. So the Oxford Companion to Philosophy clearly has it wrong when it says that it is anti-theism, specifically founded as anti-Christian belief. Notice the Blackwell Dictionary of Western Philosophy. The belief, it's a belief that God, especially a personal, omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent God, does not exist. Okay, it's a belief. So it's a belief that it's not a belief that, okay, whatever, makes my head hurt thinking about it. Peter Hitchens was the good guy. He's brother Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, of course, yeah. Peter Hitchens converted to Christianity. My bad. Yes. John, that's your opinion. We are looking at certain very highly respected academic definitions, even from atheists themselves, atheist authors themselves, who utterly and totally disagree with the lay definition. So, God does not exist. This is a belief in the Blackwell Dictionary. Let's have a look at the Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. As commonly understood, atheism is the position that affirms the non-existence of God, a position that affirms. Now, how do you arrive at a position? Well, it's a series of arguments that lead you to a conclusion. So a position is a conclusion. So you have concluded that this is the case. So it affirms this. So an atheist is someone who disbelieves in God, whereas a theist is someone who believes in God. The common use of atheism to mean disbelief in God is so thoroughly entrenched, we will follow it. We may use the term non-theist to characterize the position of the negative atheist, someone who supposedly, in theory, has no beliefs at all, just has this psychological vacuum in his head, who has no thinking going on, has absolutely never thought about the topic, because a lack of thought is, as you know, scientific. Thaddeus.
Yeah, I was just tell John to
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
not get hung up on the a prefix, because that's not really how words are defined. You don't just take the parts and the roots, and then that's what the term means. This is a very common mistake that people make, but it's absolutely a fallacy. A word's definition is not equal to its root. The often cases the English word has a very different meaning than combining its root parts. So
Right.
if he wants to say, and it's actually not even clear if he's trying to say that atheism is just a lack of belief. He's just arguing what a means, which is irrelevant.
Well, I mean, that's his personal feeling about it. But, so, I mean, someone has to get onto Routledge and tell them they have it wrong. Someone has to get onto Oxford and say, hey, you guys got it wrong. I've got 6 different references from Oxford in this show. 6 different ones from Oxford alone. All right. So someone has to tell the Oxford Dictionary that they just monumentally messed up. That John Q Atheist in the comments on YouTube, he's like, no, you guys got it wrong. Right. So, and someone let Richard Dawkins know that he was doing it wrong, that he was a little aggressive, and Sham Harris too, and then Christopher Hitchens. Someone just let them know they were doing atheism wrong, okay? Stanford University. Now, again, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is regarded as the most well-known, the most, shall we say, the most respected of the academic definitions. Now, some people love to change the meaning of words without considering the roots, which creates chaos, and that's exactly what atheists are doing. They are changing the definition, and everyone wants us to respect their personal definition. Hence, we are going to the academy, and the academy overwhelmingly agrees. And I don't mean by 51 to 49. I mean overwhelmingly agrees with the fact that atheism is a negative position, and often an aggressively negative position against God. So, now Stanford Encyclopedia is regarded generally as the gold standard, right? And we can see here in the article, atheism and agnosticism. So, specifically in the philosophy of religion, now this is about the fifth slide on this, but this is a very long article. It's very detailed, and most of the authors of this are atheists. Okay, so understand this. So this is like the gold, generally speaking, the gold standard on this. So specifically in the philosophy of religion, the term atheism is standardly used to refer to the proposition. Notice a proposition. It's an argument, right? It's a proposition that God does not exist. Thus, to be an atheist on this definition, it does not suffice to suspend judgment on whether there is a God, even though that implies a lack of theistic belief. Instead, one must deny that God exists. Right? So understand, Stanford Encyclopedia tells us atheism is a proposition. It is not a mere psychological vacuum, a lack of thinking, an unscientific, pretty primitive lack of doing any kind of cognition. It tells us you cannot simply suspend judgment. To be an atheist, given a proposition that God does not exist, you have to actively deny this. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, well, again, I guess Stanford has no idea what they're talking about. I guess all these atheists have written books of hundreds of pages explaining their position, arguing for their position, also have no clue what they're talking about, because all atheism means is without God, and thus it's just a psychological state and there is nothing to discuss.
How did Stanford miss this? How did those 20 or 30 authors that contributed to this article, how did they miss that, Thaddeus? These are some of the top atheist academics in the world. How are they not as smart as the average YouTube commenter?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
This is an egregious oversight from these people. This is negligence on a massive scale. Someone, get to Princeton right now. Give him a call. Give him a call, please. So, next, Robin Le Poidevin writes, an atheist is one who denies the existence of a personal, transcendent creator of the universe, rather than one who simply lives his life without reference to such a being. This guy clearly doesn't know what he's talking about either. So yeah, apparently this atheist, Robert Le Poidevin, says, no, you deny, which is a verb. It's an active position. You have decided this is the case, rather than someone who lives his life without reference to. And of course, we are constantly told, no, Lloyd, it is just that. Very interesting. J.L. Schellenberg says that in philosophy, the atheist is not just someone who doesn't accept theism, but more strongly, someone who opposes it. In other words, it is the denial of theism, the claim that there is no God. Now, interestingly, several of these authors, atheists themselves, and several of these academic sources state, and I saw your comment earlier, Thaddeus, but that it is anti-theism. It is specifically the antagonistic position against theism. Not just the opposite, but an antagonistically opposite position. So, yeah. So,
what I would say is that in practice, atheists are usually anti-God. They're usually anti-religion, by which I mean they think that there's something wrong with religion in a moral or emotional sense. You can also use anti to just mean that it's false. And if you're just using it in that sense, then yeah, absolutely, obviously, that's the nature of the position. So we just have to be a little bit careful about how we.
Granted, look, there is but it's still a position that it is the opposite. It is the contradictory. So it is the contradictory. Yeah, however, there are times when they state it is the antagonistically opposite position. It is an aggressively attacking position. But also, when you look at the history of modern atheism, and atheism is a fairly recent phenomenon. Okay, the whole story about, atheism goes back to the dawn of time when the smartest people in the world with Greek names all came up with it. Nonsense. Bullshit! Okay? Modern atheism is a fairly recent phenomenon, and the prophets of atheism from the time around the Enlightenment were vehemently anti-Christian. They were toxically anti-Christian. There was no denying the fact that these people went on wild screeds and murderous, in fact, literally murderous as well. So anywho, so there we go. Let's continue. We're all born atheists. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry, we're all born Muslims. I keep forgetting, Villainous. Thank you. So back to Stanford University, or sticking with Stanford. This metaphysical sense of the word, okay, is preferred over the other senses, including the psychological sense. So here, Stanford is telling us that within academia, the metaphysical sense of atheist of atheism being the antagonistic, the opposite, the contradictory position of theism, is preferred in academia. We've seen in other references it states it is the standard position. And this includes the psychological sense, not just by atheistic philosophers, but by many. They're not all atheists in philosophy as well. So the overwhelming position is atheism is the contradictory position against theism, against God. Not without, against. Okay? Not without, against. And we're going to see that within the reference as well. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, against the idea that a God exists, absolutely. Any atheist who's taking the term honestly would agree with that statement. Many atheists are additionally against a God in that they would say, and if the Christian God exists, if I'm wrong about his non-existence, then he's not a God either. He's some kind of demonic evil being. They would go further and say that as well.
Yeah. Hey, look, I know someone asked what is a woman? Well, look, it is atheists, and I will say this, it is atheists that have brought us this great information, the science, tobacco science, that men can now fall pregnant, men can have babies. These are atheists making that claim. I'm pretty sure it's not the Baptist church that started that idea. Those are atheists. That's on you. Science. So the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy recognizes multiple senses of the word atheism, but is clear about which is standard in philosophy. Atheism is the view that there are no gods. So it's a view, a worldview. Ideas have consequences. A widely used sense denotes merely not believing in God and is consistent with agnosticism in the psychological sense. Oh boy. A stricter sense denotes a belief that there is no God. This use has become standard. Oh boy. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, as it points out, we do have a term for people who merely don't believe in God, as
Agnostic.
opposed to have a certainty that there is no God. And for some reason, we have tons of people who call themselves atheists who don't want to accept that there's a different term that they could use to describe themselves, agnostic, I guess because they don't want to be associated with lack of certainty, right? They want to assert that they are certain. But then why don't they call themselves atheists and accept the normal definition? Because they also don't want to give any evidence that they're correct. And they know that if it's defined as a position that has a definite position, that it has implications, then they have to provide arguments, and they don't want to do that. So they want to walk this line where they don't want to be called agnostic because they want people to think they're certain. They want to assert they are certain, but they also don't want to be called atheist in the normal meaning of the term because they don't want to provide any evidence.
Right. So it's interesting that we have another, the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy, again, got it wrong. Cambridge didn't go to the YouTube comment section, put a comment and say, hey guys, can one of you incredibly smart internet troll comment section atheist give us a proper definition, please? They came up with this definition all by themselves. Obviously, they went to the Pope and said, hey Popey, what's the definition of atheism? Right? Well, what do you think? They went to Jerry Falwell, maybe? What do you think, Thaddeus?
Yeah, because as we all know that the elitist universities like Stanford and Cambridge and Princeton, they all are just totally filled with Christians, and they like practically force the kids to go to church service every week, right? And this is exactly what these universities stand for. Or are they the universities that are most associated with atheism?
Ooh, man, I don't know. That's really hard to think. We're going to have to think about that. So, guys, understand what is standard in philosophy is that atheism is the view, the proposition, the premise, the argument that there are no gods, and not believing is consistent with agnosticism. Oh my God, and according to Stanford. So now we have Cambridge. So it seems like we have Oxford, Stanford, and Cambridge on our side, Thaddeus. Right.
Yeah, weird.
So the Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This definition is also found in multiple encyclopedias and dictionaries of philosophy. In the concise Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy, William L. Rowe, also an atheist, writes, atheism is the position that affirms the non-existence of God. Here's another ignorant atheist. how is it that he didn't consult a scholar on YouTube? Did he consult a scholar? No, obviously not. It proposes positive disbelief rather than mere suspension of belief. Another ignorant atheist academic expert. This is crazy. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
I would just point out that William Rowe is arguably the most important atheist philosopher in terms of actual academia. People like Dawkins are a joke to actual academic atheists, and William Rowe is arguably, it's always subjective who's the most important, who's the best, but arguably he's the most important, and certainly he's one of the top 5 atheist philosophers, and apparently he also doesn't know what atheism is.
Yeah, so Graham Oppy would be considered probably the most important defender of atheism today. Graham Oppy, the Australian. So after Sobel died, that would be Oppy would be considered number 1. Generally, it seems to be. So that's the consideration. So so then finally we have, so why is it so difficult for atheists to accept that atheism is the active denial, the position, the argument, the proposition, right, making the case, when this is quite bluntly stated within atheistic circles, right, academic circles? It's the obvious answer. And then, of course, when you look at the foundation of atheism, the history of atheism, where it was founded, who its founders are, these are some of the filthiest moral people you've ever encountered, and they were vehemently, virulently anti-Christian, anti the church. So the history of atheism is filled with some of the worst people you can think of, right? Let's look at the Macmillan Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Interestingly, the Encyclopedia of Philosophy recommends a slight broadening of the standard definition of atheist. Now, this is not uncommon, atheists wanting to broaden definitions. In fact, if you read through the American Humanist Association and other atheist journals of that type, these scholars, you will find they all want to, if we change the definition, then a man can be a woman, as long as you wear a dress. If you change the definition to say dresses confer femininity and womanhood, then if I put in a dress, I'm now a woman. That's exactly what they do. It still requires, notice, even though it says we have to broaden the definition, it still requires rejection of belief in God as opposed to merely lacking that belief. Now the Macmillan Encyclopedia also gets it wrong. But the basis for the rejection need not be that theism is false. For example, it might instead be that it is meaningless, which sadly, if you go through some of the other definitions, the meaninglessness means it is agnostic. That's considered agnosticism. So, your thoughts, that is.
Well, I'd be okay with this broadening if that you assert that the statement God exists is a meaningless statement. I would find it hard for someone to actually hold that position. But if you want to include that position in atheism, fine. It's like equivalent of saying this statement is false. That's a meaningless statement. It cannot convey any information. That would be the position that they're saying, that the statement there is a God is in the same category as saying this statement is false.
Yeah. I wonder,
it's certainly nothing like what the average atheist holds, so it's rather irrelevant whether we include that in the definition or not.
I'm actually going to go to this statement. So John Stockman said, trying to prove God being personal and impersonal is an impossible task. Those who try resort to conjecture and baseless assumptions. Now, notice, this is Julian Baggini, Atheism, a very short introduction, 2nd edition, and he's a modern author and atheist. Atheism is in fact extremely simple to define. It is the belief that there is no God or gods, okay? And he says that the arguments and ideas that sustain atheism tend naturally to rule out other beliefs in the supernatural or transcendental. Now, what is important to note is that atheists are by default materialists, right? Atheists are by default materialists, and materialism by default rejects anything immaterial. Like consciousness must be, according to atheist doctrine, merely the result of atoms and chemicals colliding in the brain. Because inanimate matter, you are technically just inanimate matter. You are inanimate matter. Your consciousness is an accident, right? So they now have to utilize this. So therefore, they immediately exclude. So the evidence that atheists in this case are very dishonest. The evidence that they ask for is already excluded and deemed entirely false by their worldview. Right, so it's like saying, look, I'm looking through my telescope, I'm seeing Jupiter, and you're telling me that dolphins exist. Well, Mr. Theist, you're a liar, because I'm looking through my telescope, I don't see dolphins. Have a look, Mr. Theist. See, there's no dolphins. Therefore, dolphins do not exist. Because I'm looking through my telescope. Well, telescopes are not designed to see dolphins in the oceans. And the atheistic view absolutely, positively does not accept anything outside of those five senses, which is, again, a 4th century BC pagan view that man is the measure of all things. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I go to another slide, if I may. So go on. Your thoughts first.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I don't really have much to add to that. But again, see two more atheists here saying that atheism is a position. They even use the term belief that there is no God. And as long as it's a position, then they're responsible for bringing evidence. The theist is responsible for bringing evidence for theism. I absolutely agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
When the atheist says that, I have zero problem with the atheist telling me that I need to provide evidence for my position.
Yeah.
But as soon as I provide any evidence, no matter how weak it is in the atheist's mind, I have provided more evidence for my position than they have for theirs. No. And they need to be accountable for providing an equal amount of evidence. If they assert that their position is the one that they should hold, then they have to at least provide as evidence good as evidence as I provide.
Now notice, he says atheism has no obligation to negate any theistic belief. Well, I can find atheist philosophers, very highly educated academics, who don't hold that belief, John. Now, are they not real atheists? Are they practicing not real Islam? Are they of the Kharijites? Are they Mutazilites? Because they don't have the right position? It simply denies the existence. No, atheism historically has been an attack, an outright assault. Okay, let's have a look at Logic and Theism by Jordan Sobel. Let's have a look here. If one takes up the task of providing sound arguments for atheism, formidable difficulties arise. It is much easier to punch holes in theistic arguments than to actually argue for the truth of atheism. This is a Cambridge University Press book, Logic and Theism, Arguments for and Against Beliefs in God, Cambridge 2009, by John Howard Sobel. He's an American, but he took up residence at the University of Toronto. And before his death, Sobel was considered the leading philosophical defender of atheism prior to Graham Oppy. Now, he's describing here heuristic. Heuristic is argumentation for the sake of argumentation. It's hiyal, exactly like the Islamic practice. It is merely the point of disputation, arguing to win, to destroy the other argument, to destroy the opponent rather than to find truth. Now let's have a look at the second part of his statement. When the latter is undertaken, when the attempt, this latter here, to argue for the truth of atheism, when the latter is undertaken, we find that the needs of and the problems of the atheist are parallel to those of the theist. So he says here, atheism is no less a matter of faith than theism. And he says that, so to impose the same argumentative restrictions upon the atheist is to show that the atheistic position is at least as inadequately defended as theism. Whatever the reasons for its widespread acceptance, atheism is no less a matter of faith than theism. Now, are we dealing with another faulty atheist here, Thaddeus? Are we supposed to really just not go with these highly qualified academics and purely go with YouTube comments? Because these are my beliefs and you have to respect my truth. You have to respect my truth. It's my truth.
Ironically, when the atheist pulls that game, they're putting themselves exactly in the position that they try to stereotype religious people as. That, I have my truth and you have your truth. And it doesn't matter.
You have your beliefs, we have our beliefs. Isn't that Quran 2:256? To you, your beliefs, to me, my beliefs. Hold on. Are you guys Muslims?
Yeah, while claiming to be, rational beings, just following the evidence, no preset position, ironically, they're putting themselves exactly in the position of someone who says there is no truth, we can't determine things one way or another, blah, blah, blah. So I'll just have my beliefs and you can have yours and we can all just be happy together. Except the atheist doesn't typically assert that last phrase because they often believe that not only is Christianity false, that it's also evil and detrimental to society.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so notice Villainous does say correctly, picking holes in belief X does not provide support for belief Y. And that's exactly what Muslims do. This is no difference. This is Abdulism 101. Welcome to basic Abdulism. Right? So, yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what we've already repeated. But we have mentioned not. Okay, now hold on. Let's continue. So, of course, we need to ignore this guy because he's not a real atheist. And let's continue with where we were. So, Macmillan. So notice, you can't just lack belief because that's technically agnosticism, right? You have to actually actively reject. For that, you have to have reasons. So basically, 99% of all these academic sources tell us it's not just a psychological vacuum. It's an actual active position that denies, that provides argumentation against, right? Let's have a look at Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy once more. According to the most usual definition, an atheist is a person who maintains that there is no God, that the sentence God exists expresses a false proposition. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Somehow internet atheists don't seem to get this. In contrast, an agnostic maintains that it is not known or cannot be known. Right? On our definition, an atheist is a person who rejects belief in God. So, yeah, Thaddeus, your thoughts on that?
Again, we're seeing all of these academic sources seem to agree with what we're saying is the definition of atheism. To put it in different terms that an atheist might want to use, we're going with the consensus scientific, if you will, definition, and they're sitting there creating their own definition, creating their own lack of needing to defend their position. They're just not going with, they're just going with pure faith. They just going with their belief. They have no interest in what the scientific evidence suggests.
I would like to think I'm following the science because I'm citing here scientists, 50 plus of them, almost 60 of them. Right? I'm citing nearly 60 scientists here. And then Malcolm Leighton says very intelligently, I would think atheists have to show it is impossible for God to exist to make a claim that there is no God. Now that's actually a very, very smart point. And so atheists, and then John Stockman says, atheists can only be certain that personal gods don't exist, but nobody's able to oversee infinity. That's why nobody can know for certain there's no creator. Then you're an agnostic, buddy.
Yeah.
Now what is interesting?
He did describe himself. Now, in fairness to John, he did describe himself as agnostic.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the past, he was an atheist. Now he's an agnostic, right, John? Right? Is it just convenience for the sake of embarrassment that? I am not one of those Muslims. You know, I'm a peaceful Muslim.
I don't think he ever called himself an atheist. He was just arguing over the definition, which is strange if he's not an atheist. But I don't think he actually.
Yeah. So how come atheists don't know what an agnostic is? Why can't you just come out and say it? Okay. Now, there's no science that involves the concept of God. Exactly. No. Materialist science does not involve the concept of God. Christians created the scientific revolution. Christian thinking is responsible for the scientific revolution. Atheistic, materialistic science rejects God as a basic foundation, as its starting premise. So therefore, it cannot have God because the premise rejects that. It's like saying we do rock science. Rock science does not believe in water. Water does not exist because we only do rock science. You see, these are rocks. Water does not exist because rock science has no conception of water. Therefore, water is not real. Thaddeus, you might want to say something before I go on?
Yeah, well, what John, I don't know if my comment about we're following the science is in view here or not.
Science is a process that you follow.
Right. So there's two kind of different definitions of science. One is more narrow, and it's only about the material science. Like it can be used as a synonym for material science. But a broader definition of science is that it's how we systematically determine truth, how we determine information, and in that sense, anything can be part of science. That philosophy is a science in that sense, and that's the sense I was using it in. If that term's confusing, fine. My point was that we're following the academic consensus. We're following what would be considered human knowledge here, right? That this is the position that is the accepted position that is held by the majority of people doing the work in the field, which is exactly the same way as scientific truth is defined, is by what the majority of people in the field who have relevant experience and expertise currently hold to. That's what I was meaning, and that's what we're following here.
Yeah. And John, I've put you in timeout for 5 minutes because you're going off topic. Focus on the topic, right? I am not interested in your opinion whatsoever, right? We are discussing these definitions. So, yeah, we didn't come to consult you for your opinion on what atheism is and use that as the standard to judge by, okay? If you think Oxford is wrong, I want you to explain to me why Oxford is wrong. If Princeton is wrong, if every single of one of those dozens of authors that contributed to those encyclopedias and dictionaries is wrong, they're doing atheism wrong because they're not real Muslims, they're not following real Islam, then please let us know. But really, I don't need the distraction about talking about off-topic things, all right? Now, also, it should be noted that atheists have, and thanks to you know who you are, you'll pop up in a second here, the Duza, but atheists have most recently started to claim the idea of the multiverse. Now, of course, in the multiverse, we've got all these millions. Just to avoid having one God, they decide that, no, we've got billions and billions, an infinite number of universes. And of course, fortunately, I have discovered through inference that we live in that one universe. Thaddeus, we live in that one universe in the multiverse that happens to contain God. Just fortunately. And atheists are telling us we're wrong. Isn't that just amazing? We live in the one universe that contains God. So atheists, if you can prove to me that this is not the universe that contains God, I'd love to know that, because apparently there's billions where he doesn't exist, but in this one he does. So yeah, we just happen to live in that one.
Yeah, and this is a position that atheists have been forced to. Now, in fairness, not all atheists hold to the multiverse. But if we were to go back 20 years, approximately no atheists held to it. And a large percentage do today. And that's precisely because they've kind of been forced into this position because of the incoherence of their own beliefs in light of the fact that the universe has a finite beginning, that time has a finite beginning.
Matter has a finite beginning too, was created.
Because you need something that is infinite. This can be proven philosophically, this can be proven in a variety of ways, that if there is a present, if there is things that are here now, then there has to be things in the past, and you can never get a start.
Well, if the universe is infinitely old, if it's always existed, it would have already wound down to its heat death.
Right. So because the universe is decaying and whatnot. There's various different ways. There's both the scientific ways, philosophical ways to demonstrate that the universe has a beginning, but because they're forced, they have to accept this. It's basically an indisputable fact at this point. Well, that creates a massive problem for them because they need something that is infinite. The classic atheist belief from the Enlightenment up until the 1980 or so was that the universe was eternal. That the universe had always
steady state
existed.
theory and such, yeah.
Yes. And now they can't say that anymore, which means, oh, hold on. That's the position that theists have, that God is the only thing that's eternal. They need something else that's eternal, so they invent this idea of multiple universes that create one another, and thus make it an infinite regress, which still has the same philosophical
Which is
problem.
also logically incoherent. Infinite regress is a logical fallacy. It's an error. It's stupidity. I mean, any decent physicist will tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. So it gets around the problem of our universe obviously not being infinite in age, but it doesn't really get around the philosophical problems. And it's a position of pure desperation because there's precisely zero evidence of this. There can never be any evidence of it by the very nature of the proposition. And yet atheists hold it as a reasonable, not all atheists again, but many atheists hold it as a perfectly reasonable proposition because it gets around the need for God in their mind.
And Nicholas says, and in fairness, there are probably more theoretical physicists opposed to the multiverse than supporting it, then that would be true. And then, of course, the fine-tuning of the universe. And in fact, I had an atheist this week tell me that I was cherry-picking. I've got nearly 60 sources that I cherry-picked. 1 + 1 = 2 is cherry-picking answers. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is to cherry pick. So I was cherry picking because I went to Oxford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Cambridge. I'm cherry picking, Thaddeus.
Well, and if I recall,
And he said I don't listen to atheists. I'm citing like 50 plus atheists here, but apparently I don't listen to atheists. Yeah.
if I recall, he couldn't even find one cherry-picked definition
Yeah.
that matched his
He
definition.
literally didn't bring a single one.
If I recall correctly, he tried once, and we quickly showed that he misunderstood what the dictionary that he was quoting said, that it, in fact, agreed with us completely. And once we got, he kept trying to say, well, denial doesn't mean actual taking a position. It just means lacking. And then once we showed him the definition a couple...
I had to show him the definition of denial.
Right, then he gave up and ran away. So he couldn't even cherry pick one source to match his definition,
Yeah.
but we're cherry picking because we're quoting source after source after source.
Yeah. So now we've got Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy also quotes Graham Oppy, regarded currently as the champion philosopher of atheism, right? The champion defender of atheist philosophy. In his book, Arguing About Gods, Graham Oppy, he's an atheist, repeatedly treats agnostic in the psychological sense of someone who suspends judgment about God's existence, and atheist as a mutually exclusive category. So the world's most academic, apparently the best defender of atheism, the best academic who argues on the side of atheism, John Stockman, I said very bluntly in the chat that I was the one who muted you because you're going off topic. So...
Yeah, I don't think he's actually listening, or he would have known that.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. So Graham Oppy is supposed to be the world's most capable. Apparently this guy's incredibly intelligent, very, very smart. Okay? Apparently really smart. And he says here that having this psychological definition is agnosticism. He defines it as agnosticism. And he says atheists have a reject. They have a proposition that they defend. They actually have a position that they promote, they proselytize, right? Notice he is Professor of Philosophy and a member of the Australian Academy of Humanities, working at Monash University in Australia for 25 years. He taught mostly philosophy of religion, metaphysics, and logic. Clearly not educated, he's not a YouTube commenter. He says, my current courses are God, Freedom and Evil, Metaphysics, and the Philosophy of Religion. So... John Stockman, half the comments are off topic because you're helping them go there. So let's stick to the topic. Anyway, so this is the guy who tells us now, this highly regarded atheist academic is telling us that to have a lack of belief is just agnosticism. It is not a position of any value. It's simply just, well, okay, I don't know, so I'm not going to think about it. Whereas atheism is an actual set of propositions and beliefs, doctrine. And those are mutually exclusive categories. So again, someone who clearly doesn't know what atheism is. Now let's look at the academic American Encyclopedia, which was bought by Grolier. It says atheism, from the Greek atheos, and it defines not without God, but no God, or not God, because many define it as not God. Without is just one way of interpreting it, but in other contexts they tell us it's not God, against God, as in against. It's the for and the against position. So it says it is the philosophical position that God doesn't exist, which is a conclusion. A conclusion is reached by analysis and argument, so it is not a lack of belief. It is distinguished from agnosticism, the argument that it is impossible to know whether God exists or not. So by default, this encyclopedia now tells us that it is the argument that God does not exist. Thaddeus, before I go on, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, all these encyclopedias, they just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Can't find any of them that know the proper definition of atheism. It's so strange.
I don't know why we don't have the YouTube commentary dictionary or encyclopedia of what atheism is. You just need that, and you'll have So Nicholas says I hang around a lot of physics YouTube channels, most of them by PhDs. And they all dismiss the multiverse as a theoretical construct with zero experimental support and no explanatory value. There is absolutely no way to prove the multiverse. None whatsoever. Have you seen the multiverse? Have you seen other universes? Yeah, it's like Bigfoot, man. In fact, there's more evidence for Bigfoot. Yeah?
Like I said, it's a position of sheer desperation, and atheists used to describe it as such. But now it's super popular. Maybe not among intellectual atheists who are actually involved in academic research and actually understand the proper definition of atheism. But it's super popular among the type of pop atheists that come in and make YouTube comments. And it's a position of sheer desperation because it's untestable, provides no exploratory value whatsoever, and it always will by its very definition. So the fact that people will believe in this just shows that their atheism is not based on any well thought out position. It's not based on any evidence. It's just based on their feelings and their desires. No wonder they want to redefine atheism as lack of belief. That's kind of a feeling, right? And that's what their atheism is. It's just a feeling. It's not an intellectual position. They want to assert that they have an intellectual position, but really it's just their feeling.
So why do academics state it is a position, it's an argument, a conclusion based on a set of beliefs and thoughts and ideas and propositions? Why do the academics, actual academics, all of them tell us, hold on, atheism, we arrive at it by this analysis and we have this conclusion, these are our arguments. Academics somehow have that, and then your YouTube expert, your PhD in the YouTube channel, PhD is short for piled high and deep. Okay? It's different to the university definition. So, yeah. So, anywho, so Graham Oppie. So now let's do a quick jump, and we should wind up shortly, Thaddeus. What do you think? How long are we going to go?
Yeah. Whenever you want to end it, obviously there's quite a few slides left, so we definitely won't go through all of them. So whenever you're comfortable, I think it's a good stopping point.
Yeah, so Yaya says 4 hours. Yeah, guys, look, if you do like this content, please. Also, guys, Thaddeus' channel is linked in the title of the YouTube video. Click on the link, go to his channel. Please support his channel, subscribe there. If you do like this, please, guys, give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a share, tell people. Hopefully you're finding this useful. And if you would, this does take a huge amount of research, the time that it takes. And I mean, I have to buy books. I actually have to spend huge amounts of time on research and making slides, reading through hundreds of pages to distill all of this. So if you would like to support the channel, that would be very, very gratefully appreciated. Okay, so moving on, the Enlightenment again. Now we come back to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, don't forget, Enlightenment principles align perfectly with the principles of the Temple of Satan. That is not a joke. Enlightenment principles and the principles of the Temple of Satan and Anton LaVey's satanic practice actually align. They're the same. They're pretty much identical. Kitsune, thank you very much. He says, want to thank you, brothers, for helping in a recent discussion with an atheist. These are some determined people, though. They're like a lot of cursing, too. Yeah, I've discovered that this week. Sorry. We discovered that this week. The last 2 weeks has been pretty interesting. So atheism. Notice the Random House Encyclopedia tells us it's a system of thought developed around the denial of God's existence. Now, this one actually is really fascinating. A system of thought developed around the denial of God's existence. Atheism, so defined, first appeared during the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. This was the age of anti-Christianity, where the world's first atheist state formed. Where was the world's first atheist state, you ask? Well, in France. It was called the French Revolution. They were going to bring reason by abolishing the primitive superstition of Christianity. They did that by killing about 250,000 Christians. You know, because it's reasonable to do so. They murdered and slaughtered over 250,000 people in the name of reason. They did so in the name of reason and atheism and science. This was the scientific revolution to bring the perfect socialist society. And yeah, it was a slaughter. And of course they formed the cult of reason, where they would, in their rebellion against religion, they would have statues of the goddess of reason carried around the streets, and they would have parties and sex orgies in front of it, because this is what reasonable, rational, scientific people do. 1789, French Revolution. So for about 10 years, France was pretty messed up. So the first atheist state was a genocidally dangerous, totalitarian, oppressive, completely cultish, violent, brutal state. They would line Christians up next to shallow graves, shallow ditches, and shoot them in the head and kill them. They would drown them. They drowned thousands of priests and nuns. Thousands. I don't mean one or two. I mean thousands. They were murderous. They starved people to death. They shot people. It was a violent affair, because atheism, as you know, is the religion of peace. So the first atheist state, unfortunately, didn't get that off the ground so well. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Well, going back to the slide here, I think that Random House Encyclopedia is the Wahhabism of atheism here. The very fundamentalist here. They're saying that it's not just a denial of God's existence. In fact, it's an entire system of thought developed around that.
Yeah, but I guess these guys are not real atheists, right? So fascinatingly, so let's look at the Oxford Companion to Philosophy. Oh, another book from Oxford. Atheism is the doctrine that there is no God. What is doctrine, you ask? Well, we need to look up the word doctrine. Hold on. Let's actually, you know what? Let's look up the meaning of the word doctrine, just so that I don't make it up like atheist philosophers in the YouTube comments do. Let's look up doctrine meaning. It's actually in the slides later. Notice a principle or a body of principles presented for acceptance or belief. Oh my God, it's not just an empty psychological vacuum. It's a body of principles for acceptance or belief, as by, a religious, political, or philosophic group. Also, dogma. What does dogma mean? Well, these are ideas that are given to you that you do not refuse. They are correct. They are assumed to be correct. So it is dogma. Lloyd and Reason, you should do public exegesis together every once in a while. So what do you mean by that, Nicholas? Thank you, and thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the contribution. Thank you. What do you mean by that? What is public exegesis? So a rule or principle, a statement. So let's have a look at dogma meaning before I... what is dogma? It says it's dogma, a doctrine or a corpus of doctrines relating to matters such as morality and faith set forth in an authoritative manner by a religion. By the way, in the United States, atheism is legally a religion. They went to court. They went to the high court to complain, to bitch and moan, and they finally said, we are religion. We want to be regarded as religion, and they now have religious tax exemptions because they're a church. Atheism is a religion in the United States. Okay? Bear that in mind. That is your thoughts.
Yeah.
Accepted uncritically.
I thought that atheism was just a lack of belief, but apparently it's a doctrine, a principle or set of principles that have truth value. It might even be a dogma, because as you pointed out, that atheism is a religion, and basically dogma is just doctrine that comes from a religious organization. So
well, just so you guys know, my karma is about to drive over that dogma. So, right, so that's so atheism is the doctrine that there is no God. So some atheists support this claim by arguments. Again, so this is very similar to, but not identical to, the previous 2005 Oxford Companion, okay? So these arguments are usually directed against the Christian concept of God and are largely irrelevant to other gods. Notice, Oxford somehow tells us this is directed at Christianity and are irrelevant to other gods. Oxford Companion to Philosophy, 1995. So what does he mean by public exegesis together?
I think he just, I don't know for sure, but I think he means like doing a study of a Bible passage. Exegesis usually is used to refer to studying the Bible. Doesn't strictly speaking mean that, but that's probably what it means.
I can talk about the world's first motorcycle because the roar of David's triumph was heard across the land. So the Bible predicted motorcycles. It says so in the Bible, the roar of David's triumph. It's literal. It's in there.
That's pretty
it's
much
in the
how
Bible.
the scientific miracles of Islam work, right? So.
Yeah, they say that there's no. Yeah. So moving on. So guys, I will. Maybe we should end. Let's see which slide number I'm on. 34. Okay. Maybe we can go up. How far should we go? We like 3 or 4 more slides. Okay. So. So Scrunchy says atheism looked like it's Satanism disguised and rebranded. Actually, well, if you go through my first show, which was Atheism, the Cult of Reason, you will find that the atheist principles align directly, unambiguously, clearly with the Temple of Satan. They align with Anton LaVey's form of Satanism, which is atheistic. So there's very strong overlap, and in fact, being a denial of, being the contradictory of, being critical of, look at Dawkins, technically it does meet the standard of being anti-Christian. Yes, it does. It is satanic, because the satanic means the opposer, right, opposes God's doctrine. So therefore, this is the opposing doctrine. So therefore, it does meet that standard of being satanic. So this is Baron de Holbach. We had him earlier. We discussed him earlier. He's the first sort of technical Satanist. He wrote the first Satanist atheist. He wrote the first atheistic book. Okay, this guy's got some fascinating things to say. We'll come across him again later. Religion has ever filled the mind of man with darkness and kept him in ignorance, because it's just a lack of belief, right? Fortunately, this man has just a lack of belief. Because notice, this guy later on, well, when we come back to him a few slides later, we'll see that he's one of the first people to say that atheism, in fact, if not the first person to say, well, atheism is just a lack of belief. You know, it's just a lack of belief. But let's look at his lack of belief. Let's look at this hypocrite's lack of belief. Religion has ever filled the mind of man with darkness and kept him in ignorance of the real duties of true interests. It is only by dispelling these clouds and phantoms of religion that we shall discover truth, reason, and morality. So, according to him, the very first famous atheist, only atheism can bring you truth, reason, and morality. So it has no beliefs, it has no doctrine, it has no position, anything. But you need to go to atheists if you want truth, reason, and morality, because religion is poison. Religion diverts us from the causes of evil and from the remedies which nature prescribes. Far from curing, religion only aggravates, multiplies, and perpetuates them. Your thoughts on his lack of belief, that is?
Well, yeah, I want to make two comments. The first is that he says that only aside from religion can we discover truth, reason, and morality, which, I mean, all three of those are kind of bogus, but especially morality. I mean, who says that you can get morality from atheism? I mean, who actually says that and believes it? But he kind of gives away what he means by that. He says, from the remedies which nature prescribes. What is the remedy that nature prescribes? What is the morality of nature, Lloyd?
The survival of the fattest. Sorry, the survival of the fittest.
So morality, according to the Baron here, is the strong taking advantage of the weak.
Yes. That is, hey, I'm just quoting Saint Darwin here, okay? So don't get on my ass about that. I'm just quoting Saint Darwin. Okay, so yeah. Oh, by the way, so yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, is this not exactly what led to the rise of eugenics and ultimately the Holocaust? This belief that we can make man into a better race by getting rid of the weak and inferior man.
Sadly, when I do the series on Darwin, when we discuss that, we will see how Darwin, Marx loved him. The genocidal guys with the guys from Germany, those dudes, loved him a lot, loved him a whole lot. They killed a lot of people because of that guy. So you're going to find out that Darwin has blood on his hands. Darwin has genocide on his hands. Darwin, man, you got to see how filthy that gets, how nasty and dark that whole morass of atheism does get. Atheists, where's John Stockman? Has he run away? Because
I think so. I think once he was told that the topic was the definition of atheism, because apparently he wasn't listening to the stream and didn't know what the topic was. Once he learned what the topic was, it was too boring for him and he went away.
Right. So yeah, Black Chess says, the strong taking advantage of the weak is the opposite of Christian morality, the opposite of medieval Christian morality, exactly. Survival of the fittest. So I'll do 2 more slides, and then to finish this thread here, and then I will do 1 more bonus slide, all right? So yeah, Ernest Nagel. So we're going to talk about Ernest Nagel in just a minute. So let me continue. Is this the racist? Oh no, they were all racist. Believe me, Katsune, you have no idea. You want to see racists? Try this guy. You want to see a man who hated black people? Who had some... This guy would make the KKK blush. Okay? Let's be honest. Voltaire would make the KKK blush. Okay? So, and besides, he was banging his brother's daughter. So yeah. Puke. Voltaire the Enlightened. So remember, Voltaire is one of the greatest, is the greatest of the Enlightenment thinkers of France. He's a hero of thought. His mind was impeccable, incredible, and let's read what he had to say, because he was a deist. Voltaire was a deist, as you know, and the hatred of religion by not a few well-known philosophers and many of their followers is clearly manifested. Oh my golly, I thought they were just a lack of belief. But anyway, among others, in the above-mentioned quote of the Baron de Holbach, not to mention the well-known statement of Voltaire, I brought this from Britannica, Let's see what every sensible man, every honorable man must hold the Christian religion in horror. Right? So thank you, these two Enlightenment thinkers. So Enlightenment was really just a process of, being rational. Not hating Christianity at all, not hating the church at all, not murdering hundreds of thousands of Christians. No, 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 no. That happened, but just ignore that. Except for that, it's perfect stuff. Now, this Enlightenment was spread among the educated classes by the many societies of thought that were founded at that time. Masonic lodges, agricultural societies, and reading rooms. Where did Marx write all his crap? Oh, the reading room of the British Library. So yeah, these places were just awesome. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I go on?
Well, we can see why Voltaire is held in such high regard by the so-called new atheists, and that's because they're one and the same. They no longer is the argument Christianity is false. The argument that is usually advanced today is that Christianity is evil. It's the source of everything that's wrong in society. It's a source of all violence. We already did a couple shows looking at that claim objectively, showing that far from being true, the exact opposite is true, that atheism has led to most of the world's violence, at least in terms of raw numbers.
During peacetime, they've killed more people in peacetime than the world at war for the last 1,900 years.
Yeah, that in the last 100 years, and part of that's due to the population growth, but not entirely.
Not really.
By any means.
It's
that atheism has killed far more people. I mean, in percentage of the population, it's also far more.
Yeah, the Spanish, so Villainous just nailed us here, Thaddeus. There's the Spanish Inquisition. We need to answer for that because, as you know, the Spanish Inquisition killed between 800 and 3,000 people. Okay, let's be generous, 5,000, over 400 years. Let's be generous, over 350 years. So hold on, let's just work that out. Let's actually work that out. Let's see. Okay, let's give them 5,000 people, and we divide that by 350 years. Let's just call it that. So the Spanish Inquisition, which was a government-approved process, okay, was not run by the church. This was secular. 14.28 people a year, which, as you know, is a genocide. How many people did World War I kill? Just under 30,000 people a day. Okay, so World War I was killing nearly 30,000 people a day, but the Inquisition is bad. Okay, so yeah, so World War I killed 6 people more per day than the Spanish Inquisition did at its absolute maximum. All right, and it did it in 4 years as opposed to over 350. Right. So super strict. Oh, by the way, did John Stockman take any of our definitions on board, Thaddeus? Did he take any of this on board? Did he actually acknowledge any of these as correct?
I think, as far as I know, and I could have missed a comment. I do want to be fair, but I'm pretty sure his last comment was that since you're only talking about atheism, I can't talk about Jesus. And then I said the topic is the definition of atheism, and I'm pretty sure he never said anything else. I'm pretty sure that
after that topic. Yeah, so he wanted to go off topic and talk about Jesus, just like when we talk about Islam, they want to talk about the Bible is corrupted and Jesus didn't exist, right? That's just like good grief. So okay, by the way, Voltaire for 8 cents. The French atheist Voltaire once said, "In 20 years, Christianity will be no more. My single hand shall destroy the edifice it took 12 apostles to rear. In 50 years, no one will remember Christianity." That's good old Voltaire. In the same year that Voltaire wrote that, the British Museum paid the Russian government $500,000 for a Bible manuscript, while one of Voltaire's books was selling in the London bookstores for just 8 cents, as we learned from James Montgomery Boyce. Voltaire was going to destroy Christianity, and no one would remember it in 50 years. So, yeah. So Christianity stopped existing by 1840, apparently. Right, now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Let me just, yeah, guys, so you can feast your eyes on my desktop daily, desktop wallpaper. Okay, so final slide. We'll just finish this one, and Thaddeus, yeah, you're familiar with it. So, this is Ernest Nagel. Now, I am simply extracting Ernest Nagel out of this, okay, because he's one of 20 authors that contributed to this. These authors were specifically chosen because they are radical atheists, and because they have clarity of thought and present strong arguments and are great defenders of atheism. And I just happened to be taking Nagel because he just happened to be the first guy in the book. Anyway, so critiques of God, making the case against belief in God, because atheism is just a lack of belief. It's a religion of peace that just lacks belief, you see. It's a religion of peace that doesn't make the case for anything. It's not a position on anything. There's another printing of the book. The cover, that cover has a major statement of the case against belief in God. For some reason, these 20 highly academic, well-known, famous atheists didn't realize that atheism is just a lack of belief and it is not against God. Isn't that just like, what is wrong with these academic atheists, that is?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't count the exact number of authors there, but it looks like about 15 authors. Most of these are very well-known names. These are very popular figures in atheism, and they're all lending their essays or chapters, whatever you want to call them, to this compilation called Making the Case Against Belief in God. I thought that atheism was merely a lack of belief. I thought that if you use the word against, you're ignorant and you're stupid and you don't know what you're talking about, which apparently means that all these well-known atheist thinkers also don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So, by the way, Anthony Flew, at the end of his life, he apostatized from atheism, and he was vilified by people like Richard Dawkins for being an apostate. Dawkins actually called him an apostate, which yeah, good thing, because he committed blasphemy. Apparently, he left the faith. And then, of course, John Dewey is the founder of the American public school system, and we need to get into that guy one day because he believed that atheism was a religion, believe it or not. You see, to him it was a religion, the common faith of mankind. And all mankind needed to be taught this faith. This lack of belief had to be taught. Interesting, the psychological vacuum had to be taught. You had to be taught how not to know anything, how to be ignorant, how to whatever. Stupid. So, let's have a look. Atheist religious thought, Ernest Nagel. He says here, I must begin by stating in what sense I'm attaching to the word atheism. It is a critique and a denial of the major claims of all varieties of theism. So it's a denial, it's a verb. And he says several things immediately follow from these definitions. These ideas have consequences. This is a worldview. He says, in the first place, atheism is not necessarily an irreligious concept. Now, of course, I've been told the whole day by atheists today that when they say it's not irreligious, they don't mean it's religious. They just mean that it's the past participle of a raxylated root that has been decogitated during the Saturnian period of the fourth particulate root of the English translation from the Greek. And in the Greek, it actually means to have no faith. You see, so you are mistranslating it, right, Thaddeus?
Yep.
Did I say that correctly? And because you see,
I think you pretty much said
because
it right.
we're not reading it in the original Arabic, right? You have to read it in the original Arabic. So he tells us atheism is not necessarily an irreligious concept. The opposite of that is, of course, that it is a religious concept. For theism is just one among many views concerning the nature and origin of the world. The denial of theism is logically compatible with the religious outlook. Hold on. So now he clarifies for us. The denial of theism is logically compatible with the religious outlook, and is in fact characteristic of some of the great historical religions. Early Buddhism is a religion which does not subscribe to any doctrine about a god, because Buddha was an atheist, of all things, and his followers made him a god. And there are pantheistic religions and philosophies which, because they deny that God is a being separate from the world, are not theistic in the sense above. So yeah, he's telling us atheism is a religion. This guy is a highly qualified, well, no, he's not. He's not a YouTube commentator, he doesn't know anything. And he says atheism is not to be identified with sheer unbelief. A child who has not received, atheism is not to be identified with sheer unbelief, which is what YouTube atheists want to claim today. A child who has received no religious instruction and has never heard about God is not an atheist, for he is not denying any theistic claims. I think that's pretty blunt. It's a religion, it's a religious worldview, and it is something you consciously decide upon. Right? Is that correct, Thaddeus? Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah. Yet another academic, intelligent atheist who doesn't know what atheism is, I guess. such a shame.
Yeah, agreed. So this was 1979. This was in the distant past, roughly just like a week or three after the meteor took out the dinosaurs, right? So it's roughly in that period, okay? So it's the distant past. So let's have a look at a much more modern definition from 1980, less than 12 months later, an anthology of atheism and rationalism. And they say here, Baron de Holbach wrote the first openly atheistic book, The System of Nature, in 1770. And we can see from Holbach's own writings that he defined atheism in this way. He wrote in his book Good Sense, 1772, all children are atheists. Sorry, all children are Muslims. They have no idea of God. Of course, the idea of children who have not been exposed to theism being by definition atheists. This follows from our definition of an atheist as someone without a belief in God. So, a child who has received no religious instruction and has never heard about God is not an atheist, for he is not denying theistic claims. All children are atheists. They have no idea of God. Children who have not been exposed to theism being by definition atheists, which follows from our definition of an atheist, someone without a belief in God. Thaddeus. Now, this is, I think the audience, hopefully you can see, this is entirely two contradictory statements.
Mm-hmm.
And atheism is like...
I think...
And I was told today, but these are atheists and they're both right. Okay. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think that we just found the Shia-Sunni divide in Islam, whether or not children are true atheists. And apparently they're both right because, as we know, it's only about numbers. So Islam is the fastest growing religion because you count all the Sunnis and all the Shias and all the 50 billion different sects that Sunni is split into. You count them all, and then when someone says something you don't like, then you deny them. So you count all the atheists. It doesn't matter if they say contradictory things. They're all true atheists. They are all correct until, of course, you have to say, well, which one do you believe in? And then the person will say, either A is wrong, or they'll say B is wrong, or apparently some atheists won't even do that, based on your conversation earlier. But they're all true atheists, nothing to see here.
Yeah, so apparently this contradiction, we just don't understand it because these are misunderstood artists that we just can't comprehend because we are theists and we are irrational. Okay, thank you. So this is stupid. Now notice, I had an atheist come to me yesterday and the guy was saying, well, Lloyd, we have to accept the modern definition of atheism. The modern definition is that atheism is merely a lack of belief. This is the commonly accepted view amongst atheists. We have to accept this definition as the standard one. We must reject all past definitions, you see? We must reject all these past definitions. Those are irrelevant. Well, you know what? What's odd is that the definition that atheist is someone who just lacks a belief, well, that happens to be the old definition from 1772. All of these modern definitions all state that atheism is an outright assault on the idea of God. So, hold on, buddy. By your definition, you need to give up that crap that you're believing, because that's not rational. You're believing a 1772 belief. I'm stuck here in the 21st century because I'm irrational. So, yeah, you're a hypocrite. F off. Excuse my French, but these guys get up my... Yeah, sorry. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, it's really rather silly that they want to spend all their time arguing about definitions of words. In the end, whatever term you call something is totally irrelevant. The atheist, if they want to assert that atheism means a mere lack of belief, then that slide that Lloyd showed right from the start is true, right? That is accurate of who they are. That's what an atheist is. But they don't want to be that. They definitely don't want to be that. So if they don't want to be, just someone who lacks belief, has no opinion, blah, 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 then they need to bear some responsibility for demonstrating evidence of their position. I don't like using the word proof. It's a game that atheists play. They say you can't prove God, therefore he doesn't exist. Well, because you can always redefine proof. You can't even prove that the universe it wasn't created 10 minutes ago with apparent age and false memories and all kinds of things.
Yeah, if this is a
But
simulation, it was just programmed into you. Thanks, have a nice
yeah,
day.
exactly. Uh, the only thing that you can actually establish with certainty is that you yourself exist. You can't establish that other people exist. You can't establish that the physical universe
But
exists.
that's
And
nihilism,
it
and that's in fact Gorgias from again the 5th century BC. So now you're back to paganism. You're back to stupid pagan ideas from 2,500 years ago, and going, that's science because you see I'm an atheist, and then therefore I'm scientific, and I am now. Oh, that's pagan? No, Lloyd, it's actually modern science. I slapped science on its ass, and now it's science. No, it's frickin' paganism from Greece. Thank you, from 2,500 years ago. Go away. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, the atheist would never accept that standard of proof for anything else. You can demonstrate it by making them prove their own existence, their own intelligence, that they're a human being and not a spam bot, whatever. And they won't be able to do it by their own standard, and they don't accept that standard. And it's because they're playing a game. So I don't use the word proof. I use provide evidence. Atheists are responsible for providing evidence for their position. They're not necessarily responsible for proving beyond all doubt that atheism is true, but they are responsible for bringing evidence. Likewise, theists are responsible for bringing evidence. And that's what we do. We bring evidence. And then the atheist who wants to play the game says, I don't accept your evidence, therefore you have no evidence, therefore atheism is true. And that is not a responsible position. That's not a adult position. If they want to claim that children are born atheists, I'm fine with that. Atheism is the position of unthinking babies. I agree.
Yeah, you're right. And then they grow up. You're right. That's a fair point. That's actually really, really good. So, guys, I should wind down here. I've gone longer than anticipated. We've been here nearly a week. And, yeah, guys, so this is where we are at. This is exactly where we are at. So if I go back to where we were just a moment ago, yeah, and notice atheism. Now we've got multiple. Just want to show you guys this. Atheism. Is there a doctrine in the house? From Merriam-Webster, since 1828, atheism is a body of principles, a branch of knowledge, a system of belief. A body of principles is known as a doctrine. They call it Catholic doctrine. This is straight from Merriam-Webster. Go look it up yourself. And they call it a dogma or Catholic doctrine. So in other words, atheist doctrine is no different to Catholic doctrine. It's doctrine. It's a frickin' church of belief, right? Dogma, stuff you can't doubt. A belief or set of beliefs, especially political or religious, taught and accepted by a particular group, like atheists. Christian doctrine. Oh my, Cambridge. What, these ignorant academics. A particular principle, position, or policy taught or advocated as of a religion or government. Catholic doctrines, dictionary.com. Something that is taught, teachings collectively, religious doctrine. Yeah, well, yeah, guys. So I don't know. Am I seriously supposed to believe dumbass 402 in the YouTube comment section, or do I, as I've done, go through dozens of major academic sources? And please don't tell me Cambridge is a cherry pick, okay? Oxford is a cherry pick. Princeton is a cherry pick. What am I supposed to believe? So I'm going with the science here. I'm going with the scientists. I'm following the science, and I have no idea what these idiot atheists are doing. Excuse my French. Thanks. I get really worked up sometimes. So that's me. I'm done. Thaddeus, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely that we are presenting the evidence. I guess the atheist, or the person who wants to call himself an atheist, who wants to also deny that he is an atheist when we use the definition, he's free to reject all the evidence and have a position of pure faith, say that he's right and all the evidence is wrong. That's fine. He can do that. But don't expect me to respect him as a rational adult just going where the evidence is if he's rejecting all of it.
Yeah, because the evidence, as Yahya tells us, the evidence is da'if. That is, it's the wrong translation. You have to read it in the original Arabic. It's da'if. That's a da'if translation.
Gotcha.
We need to read it in the original Arabic. And Nicholas complains. He says, this must be the first time that Lloyd went on longer than he had intended. Not that I mind. Okay, so maybe it's not a complaint. Yeah, I've never done that before. This is the very first time, and it hurts me. It hurts me to do this. So, Hillslide says it doesn't say that, Lloyd. It doesn't say what it says. I know it says what the atheist says it says. It doesn't say what it says. Um, so yeah, guys. So that's it. I mean, just
See,
yeah,
the problem is I speak American English and you speak South African English. If we spoke British English, we would understand.
British Arabic. Oh my god. Yeah. Sorry. That's out of my. That's. You speak American. In fact, you don't even speak English. You speak American. Okay.
Yeah, yes, there you go.
So yeah, guys. So this look. I mean, I think it is very obvious from the sources that academia overwhelmingly and unambiguously, like literally 99% of these sources, tell us it is not a state of unbelief, just a psychological state, this vacuum of consciousness. It is an active position, often an aggressively active position. So that's why, yes, atheists and Muslims make good allies. So, guys, hopefully I've made my point here. I was cherry picking from only the finest academic sources, sadly. I cherry picked from Merriam-Webster, and as you know, anyone who goes to Merriam-Webster or Cambridge Dictionary or Oxford, those are cherry pickers. So, yeah, I'm a cherry picker. I guess I'm guilty. So yeah, good night, guys, and thank you, Mike. Malcolm Leighton, The Gospel, Good News of Atheism, No Ultimate Authority. Yeah, these people are incoherent babblers. Atheism is pagan, Gnostic babble. It's incoherent trash. Honestly, I must admit, after reading so many pages and looking through so many books, it's trash. Okay, sorry about that, but yeah, it's just rubbish. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm supposed to be polite and friendly because sorry about that. It's really not an idea that I can support. I don't feel that it has the necessary appeal to my senses that I can actively support this. It's not ideal for me. No, thank you. How about yourself, Thaddeus?
Yeah, it's just not an idea that I find any evidence to support. I don't need to be mean about it. I just don't. The atheists say they don't need to bring any evidence, and I say if they don't bring any evidence, I don't need to believe what they have to say.
Yeah, but it's a lack of evidence. It's not just a lack of belief. It's a lack of evidence because you don't need evidence for lack of belief. So it's not evidence. It's evidence free. It's an evidence free belief. It's not a belief. Sorry, it's evidence free because it's not a belief. So there is no evidence for it, except they'll drown you in evidence because you're wrong. Yeah,
evidence-free, non-belief, non-position, psychological state that we just have to accept people are in. That's all there is to it. And when they write a 500-page book explaining their position, we should just ignore that because it
and how you're wrong.
Doesn't have any words in that book.
And how you were wrong because they have an unbelief system. Oh God, my head. So seriously, I call it stupid. These people are stupid. Seriously, when you read the pagan Greeks, you realize, hey, this is the same crap Richard Dawkins says. This was said by idiot pagans 2,500 years ago. It's not even smart philosophy. Aristotle thought it was crap back then. Okay, so I stand with Aristotle. So guys, I've got to get out of here. We're going to keep going, Thaddeus. So good night, guys. I hope this was useful. Yeah, please, again, like, share, subscribe, do support the channel. And if you like this material, find it useful, please use this stuff. And remember, share it to annoy people. I post this on Facebook to annoy people. If you like what I say, look me up on Facebook. I post things just to annoy people. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know. Maybe it's a sin. If someone can show me in the 10 Commandments, I'll stop doing it. Anyway, so good night, guys. Take care. And He Never Returned as a Horse, welcome. Please look me up. Send me an email, He Never Returned as a Horse. I'd love to chat with you one day about your experience in the Middle East, man. That'll be great. So I know you said you're like 1,000,000 years old and, you'd predate the dinosaurs, but still, let's work something out. Okay? Oh yes, and yeah, I found a new payment method, not PayPal, Stripe. I've managed to, for Revolut doesn't work with everyone, but you can see support me at coffee.com, Lloyd Jongh. So yeah, guys, I also need to get on my memberships thing. I have not been paying attention to that. But guys, let me get out of here. Okay, have a great weekend, guys. I might see you on the weekend again. Take care, everyone. See you then. Bye-bye.
God bless.